Hello? How's that sound? Good. Test, test, one, two. Good. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to get started. My name is Dallas. I am the curator of programs here at Art Metropole. Thank you all so much for being here today at this packed house event. I wanted to start today's event with a land acknowledgement and acknowledge that Art Metropole, where we're gathered, is situated on the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are incredibly grateful to be here and reverent to over 12,000 years of human activity on these lands. And Toronto is covered with the Dish with One Spoon Wampun Agreement, which was created by the Indigenous peoples of the Great Lakes and signifies that we respectfully share this land as we eat from the same dish with one spoon. And perhaps this goes without saying, but when I acknowledge the Dish with One Spoon Wampun, I like to also acknowledge that it's a treaty that has been broken multiple times through the violence of settler colonialism. I also wanted to express our deep solidarity with Palestinian communities and that we see the solidarity as completely intertwined with our solidarity with Indigenous communities here in so-called Canada. And I hope that this land acknowledgement can be taken not as a institutional statement of closure, but instead as a reminder that occupying this space is a privilege and that it comes with responsibilities. And then, yeah, in the spirit of thinking about and acting on these responsibilities, I also wanted to bring attention to PACB, which is the Palestinian campaign for the academic and cultural boycott of Israel, as a means to promote justice, equity, and human rights for Palestinians. Art Metropole has signed on to PACB, and myself and my colleagues Blair and Tess, who are here, are always happy and eager to talk to other arts workers about how the organizations that we work for can be a part of fighting for Palestinian human rights and what that might look like on an organizational level. So chat with us after the talk or any other time if that's something you're interested in. Yeah. And then also, before we get into today's event, I just wanted to highlight some upcoming programs happening at Art Metropole, if you'll let me. So this month, we are sort of relaunching our performance lecture series, Reactivating the Archive. This is an event series where we're having artists and curators respond to publications and editions published by Art Metropole over our 50-year history. And the next event in the series is actually happening next week. February 19th, Garrett Lockhart is going to be responding to Maurizio Nanucci's artist book, Lives Here. So if you're around, please join us for that as well. That's next week. Today, we're here to celebrate, I guess, technically the Canadian launch of Amy Ching-Yan Lam's book, Property Journal, which is co-published by Bookworks and Richmond Art Gallery. And today's event is co-presented by Art Metropole and Pumice Raft as a part of Pumice Raft's Undercurrents Forum. And Parker and Chris run the Undercurrents Forum. They're here. They're going to say a couple words about what that is, and I'm going to pass this mic off now.
Oh. Thanks, Dallas. Hi, everybody. As Dallas introduced, I'm Parker Kay. I run Pumice Raft, which, if you haven't heard, it's a nonprofit art space in Toronto, located on Riding Avenue, which is St. Clair and Runnymede. And yeah, we're excited to be co-presenting with Art Met. I was a staff member here in 2013 and 14, and then on the board on dates I can't exactly recall, actually, 2018 to 2022 or something like that. So it's exciting to kind of be partnering on this event.
Yeah. And I'm Chris Mendoza. I'm an artist and longtime Pumice Raft collaborator at this point. So as Parker mentioned, or as Dallas mentioned, sorry, we're thrilled to be able to co-present the book launch today as part of the Undercurrents Forum. And I'm just going to do a quick little plug for that for folks who are not familiar. So the Forum is a public program that investigates notions of public and private space and the geopolitics that underlie them, and how these impact artistic productions. So in Toronto and across the country as well. We currently hosted our third event, which at Top Projects on Geary, which dealt with kind of questions of public space and publics. And we have more in store in the year coming, so keep an eye out for that.
We've been trying to involve Amy in the Undercurrents Forum in whatever way we can, so we're excited to be partnering on this event, and we feel that there's quite a few affinities between kind of the themes that emerge throughout Property Journal and kind of the themes that Chris just outlined in the program. We see in Amy's book an important and parallel engagement with the pervasive nature of private property that underscores people's lives and livelihoods. This has, of course, been a major line in the Undercurrents Forum as we focused on the entanglement of real estate development and culture in Toronto and Canada, from funding to private-public partnerships through to policies that integrate cultural production into nonprofit and for-profit developments.
And we'll be both kind of working, managing kind of a live stream for this event today, and Parker will be working on kind of producing some video. So the goal for this, of course, is to kind of increase the ability of like digital accessibility to these conversations, while also creating like a means of proliferating the conversations post just this particular event, so that there's both an archival trace and also the possibility to kind of like return to it and keep going and kind of get into that. So.
And a note, if anyone's actually watching on the internet right now, you can type questions in the chat and we can integrate them maybe in the Q&A period. Chris will be on it. So I will introduce our first reader. Trynne Delaney is a writer currently based in Toronto, with roots in the Maritimes. Recently, they've been thinking about the space between desire and departure. Trynne, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Congratulations, Amy, on the launch of Property Journal. I personally loved it, and I'm sure anyone who hasn't read it also will. I'm here with many devices to read from today, but the first one that I'm going to start with is not mine. It's My House by Nikki Giovanni, and I'm going to just read one poem from here. So I read Amy's book, and then I immediately picked this book up at a bookstore close to my house. And I was not expecting the connections that I found when I read it, but it's a book that's about the domestic and follows in the Black radical tradition of like not positioning property as related to the concept of home. And that's a theme that I really saw in Amy's work as well, and was really inspired by in the way that she wrote about it. So I'm also going to, I've just been keeping that in mind. Plus, she just passed away, rest in peace. And it's Black History Month, so here we go. It's called Nothing Makes Sense. A bright sunflower yellow tiger was at my bedroom door, teeth bared, ready to pounce, when the child cried, "The bear's going to get me!" And I completely understood, because I had to really wake up fast to keep that tiger back. Nothing is real, especially tones I heard, a rumbling, and thought the world was coming to an end, and saw my body blown to bits and crushed under the rubbish that had been the 100th Street apartment complex. My guppies struggled for one last breath, and my turtle, head hidden in his shell, never to fuss again at me for not cleaning him. The blinding light started in the 96th Street subway and quickly swept up to my house, melting my flesh into the cactus plant at my bedside and as my hand blended into a thorn, I wondered what it would be like to never hold anyone again. What never was cannot be, though it engulfed me and I cried, what always is not the answer. They came from all over the world in planes, in boats and dirigibles, on kites and pollen seeds riding bikes, and horses bareback on electric roller skates, and Lionel trains all carrying an instrument to play, or blow and bleat, and the sound called all the carnivores from all over the world, the aardwolf and the puma playing the talking drum, even the snow leopard with a long, thin, hollowed ice flute came from his Himalayan retreat, and all the snakes over 10 feet long slithered through the heavy traffic to my house to play a mass, and through the altos and the basses and your condescending attitude, Aretha started a low moan. The outline of a face on a picture isn't really a face or an image of a face, but the idea of an image, of a dream that once was dreamed by some artist who never knew how much more real is a dream than reality. So Julian Bond was elected president and Rap Brown Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and Nixon sold himself on 42nd Street for a package of Winstons with a down-home taste, and our man on the moon said, "Alleluia," and we all raised our right fists in the power sign, and the earth was thrown off course and crashed into the sun. But since we never recognized the sun, we went right on to work in our factories and offices and laundromats and record shops the next morning, and only the children and a few poets knew that a change had come. It's very topical. Next, I'm going to read from my book, The Half Drowned, which I published with Metatron Press, a press out of Montreal in 2022. This is a speculative fiction book about a Black community on the East Coast, which is where I'm kind of from. That's where all my family is, and where they have been since at least the 1700s. And I don't live there anymore, I live here, but whenever I go back, I've noticed, especially in the years since the pandemic, Amy also talks about this in her book, the amount of gentrification and purchase of property by people from Ontario and other larger metropolitan areas has really changed the landscape and increased the kind of wealth disparity that was already very present there. I'm from New Brunswick, which is I think the second poorest province in the country and has the lowest literacy rate. Anyway, I just think of that when I go back there now and visit my family. And I was thinking about it a lot already when I was writing this book pre-2020. This is just from the first chapter. Back in the day, we worried about rogue waves, street checks, library fees, clean water, developers, all our cousins moving west for opportunity. On some calm weekend, maybe our grandparents would take us out to the beach and we'd pretend that there was no danger despite the omens. Seal carcasses and plastic vomited onto shore. We turned away, threw bottle caps back out into the water, nested waste in more plastic bags. All this destruction, and we were only casual believers in endings. Those rocks we used to climb, crumbled, tired sediments, everything wasted down. We used to live in old salt boxes, on farms, public housing, bungalows, apartments. Imagine the walls in a toxic salmon pink our parents chose to favor. Triangulated destiny, our homes placed us between a pulp mill, oil refinery, and nuclear power plant. Big business employed us, let us rise in ranks when convenient. Maybe ends didn't faze us because they happened all the time. But of course, our end came first with the official papers scrawled in an unknown script some hundreds of years ago, these small wounds of loss ulcerated within that large-mouthed hole. We became stolen people on stolen land, and so we stayed when everyone who could left for the sky. Before and after and always here, our thousands of joys proliferated. We couldn't leave. Finally, we had the invitation to live on this land, in peace and friendship like we never did before. We keep it simple, live as well as we can. In the first floods, there was euphoria even after we lost our homes. We had to move uphill into some unsteady yet permanent state of being earthbound. Sometimes we still buzz with the excitement of living through intentional destruction when we get a storm bad enough to make you soar, but not enough to make you ache for generations. Everyone out in their wading pants finding something unexpected in the water. Looking down to where the silt has settled, a clear current runs, something sparkles from a crack in soggy pavement. Maybe it's fool's gold. Then again, sometimes what you thought you lost resurfaces. Okay, we're going to switch lanes a little bit now. Has anyone seen the movie The Lost Daughter? Yes? I'm seeing some nods. Everyone's really quiet in here. What's going on? Why is everyone so shy? Yeah, so I wrote a poem about the lost daughter and about my relationship with my mom. I think last year now. I don't know. Time is very weird these days, but it was published in The Mood magazine, which I'm sure some people here know. It's an awesome magazine that publishes like writing on films. One of my favorite magazines. Anyway, shout out to them. The Lost Daughter. I almost forgot my prop. We start the movie anyway, even though we can't get the picture right. My mother says she never noticed everything on her new partner's TV was too real. Whatever it is that separates film from life is not present. Watching, everything appears too close. The water, tangible, her pillow, damp, scent of orange and must. Each frame per second works up a sweat, breathes humidity till her closeness leads to rot. Nothing can surprise me. The center is not held. Yet, of course. I just want to know what happens next. What happened then is full and dragging. On the walk through her new hometown, she tells us a story about when they lived in a tent and her mother mistook a raccoon for a skunk. It didn't end how it was supposed to. It ended how it happened. Spray came up from the ocean with bad cologne and romance. We almost forgot the crying in the background. And as the forest looms, she turns at attention to see if I am laughing at the joke of the missing doll on every tree. Like the skunk, I'd forgotten I was in a story and averted my gaze. Let hers turn me to object, plastic or porcelain, I am not sure. And what will be the right tool to break me? To spill that I'm hurt and I cannot tell her because she did not know. On the drive up, me and the witness talked about making babies, knowing my mother had kept all my toys. Upon arrival, I left them alone. My mother whispered to the witness that she's scared to leave things with me because I might kill them. It might be true, but I'm not scared of euthanasia. We've yelled at each other that we were selfish and stopped holding hands. When she talks at me on Sundays, sometimes the 2 weeks of not knowing exactly where she was gestates in pauses. Attention is a generosity and a thirst. I suck down the salty water I am handed. I know this is love, and I forgive it. She says this movie could have easily been called The Bad Mother, but I disagree. Lost is the word complicated, and there it is, the snake biting its tail again. And there is the bed, and in the bed is the belly button, and there is the morning, on the table is the orange. What love and duty and attention did we suppose, and what love and duty and attention were art? I've surrendered. This is the last poem I'm going to read. It's called When I Could Only Eat Boiled Eggs. And it's about when I could only eat boiled eggs. When I could only eat boiled eggs, presence shifted on its heels in line, woozy, always hungry. My world turned small and fragile. Fluorescence hummed a reminder of limitations. In the gallery with my friends, I was proud. Took my turn with a heavy box of offerings cradled in our many hands. We ate with our mouths oohed around albumin. I realized not once have I peeled an egg perfectly. Fingernails always cut small moons through the skin. After congratulations, we went home, where I placed a whole empty world inside and swallowed a year. Later, announced my love for everyone over WhatsApp. The joke was that I'd finally had 1 hour to myself, so I was happy. Presents rocked in my arms, fragile. Against capital, my mouth cracked into a smile, and I bloomed into my surroundings with affection. In a whole empty world, I was small. This morning, I broke 2 eggs in half for breakfast. The sky was membranous and fluid, like the echoes of my insides I downloaded to watch in a dark room. Without their shells, each cavity is normal or unimpressive, words that deny the specific itching pain noted in the upper right quadrant. For me, denial is the most familiar form of embodiment. Outside is a whole empty world filled with violence. I am in love with everyone. I do not know why nothing passes through me easily. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trynne. I am going to invite up Amy and Amani now, or maybe just Amy at first, to talk a little bit about the book, and I'll read some bios before we do that. Amani Bin Shikhan is a writer and culture worker from Toronto's East End. Throughout the years, she's worked to build across history and diaspora. These days, she's undoing it all. And Amy Ching-Yan Lam is an artist and writer. Exhibitions and performances have been presented at Seoul Media Center Biennial, Western Front, East Side Projects, and numerous DIY venues. She is the author of Baby Book and a finalist for the Governor General's Literary Awards in Poetry, Ludi Goes to Heaven, and Property Journal. From 2006 to 2020, she was part of the performance art duo Life of a Craphead. Please welcome Amy.
Oh, Dallas, could you let me into your computer? Thank you. Hi, everyone. Is my mic on? Yes. Thank you so much for coming. While Parker sets up my mic stand. Yeah, thank you, Parker. I'm really excited to be here to be presenting this book in Toronto. My therapist told me to say I'm excited to be here, like out loud to the audience before I do any reading, because I was struck with stage fright in 2022, and it really works. But I think I'm also more nervous to be here in Toronto presenting it, because I know so many people in this room and I admire so many of you. So yeah, thank you so much for coming. How do you put a mic in a mic stand? Okay, there we go. So I'm going to read from the book. I'm going to read the first month or so. That's okay. I think I got it. Yeah, thank you. Oh yeah, that's the issue. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to read the first month of the book, which was December 2021. But before I do that, I just wanted to give some thanks to Trynne for your amazing reading, and that Nikki Giovanni poem, which was really lovely, and also reading from your book, which I'm excited to read. Yeah. Thank you to Art Metropole and to Pumice Raft for hosting this together. And yeah, especially to Pumice Raft for live streaming and creating a accessible version of this, and also for your work with the Undercurrents Forum and work in Toronto locally. Thank you to Art Met for supporting my work since like 2006 when I was an unhappy English literature grad student and was trying to get out of literature, and then discovered this weird thing called artist books. And I was like, what is this? And it's amazing. Yeah, so I'm really grateful for to both of these orgs for working together and presenting this. Thanks also to my publishers, Richmond Art Gallery and Bookworks, who are in London, and Bookworks is supporting this event. And I just want to, give a shout out to them and plug some of their work because they're publishing really amazing books. This year they published an expanded facsimile edition of Cecilia Vicuña's Saborami, which is a book that she made in the 70s when the Chilean coup was underway. And so, this edition's amazing. If you can get your hands on it, you can order from Bookworks or online. And they also published an amazing novel this year called The Wastes by Roy Claire Potter. So shout out to all of these orgs for supporting this work. And I think this book is so much about how this type of space, I mean, you probably hear it all the time, but this type of space and like room for just culture that's not in the mainstream is getting eaten and decimated all the time. So I really want to extend my gratitude and just, ask for all of us to support this work in the ways that we can. So I'm going to read, and then afterwards I'll be joined by Amani, and we're going to talk about the book, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. And I guess if you get tired standing, like maybe you can swap out with someone sitting. I was at an event the other month where someone fainted, so we don't want that to happen. Okay. So I'm going to read the dedication and the introduction, and then, the entries. So the book is dedicated to everyone fighting against property. And this is the introduction. I started this property journal at the end of 2021 and kept it for 13 months until the end of 2022. The idea was to write down all of the instances where real estate, property, and housing came up in conversation. To maintain some anonymity, I've changed the names of friends, family, and others to those of household objects. Part of the compulsion to start this journal came from how I identify with being a, quote, productive person. I've always wanted to have a daily writing practice, but never managed to keep one. Many of the verbs that are used to describe actions in relation to time, waste, carve, kill, can also be used with property. I've heard that you shouldn't bring up real estate in conversation because then you'll get stuck talking about it. The conversation will get stuck. So, December 1st. The Uber driver complained to me, "It's too expensive living in Toronto. The houses are too expensive here. You can't buy anything." My friend bought a house near Barrie. It was $200,000. Now it's worth $800,000. If you want to buy anything, you have to buy outside of Toronto. 2nd December, Saucer and Muffin Tin said they woke up early one morning to pieces of their apartment complex's roof flying past their window and contractors yelling "wee" and "woo" from above as they tore it apart. They threw pieces of it everywhere, covering their doorway, the plants in the garden, everything. Their landlord hadn't given anyone in the apartment complex any notice. Piles of black roofing material blocked the stairs so they couldn't leave, and one of their neighbors' windows was smashed by the flying debris. The residents complained, and then the following week, the same contractors came back and completed the exact same job without making a huge mess. Talked to my sister Blender, who's pregnant for the first time, about the new house that she and her partner Mop bought a few months ago. My sister and her family really wanted to come, but anyway, there's like children involved. But they were going to come, and then my sister was joking that they're going to wear like Blender and Mop outfits. costumes. So they're gutting and renovating the house so they can live in it with their parents, with our parents. It's like a Freudian thing. It's a 3-story house with 4 bedrooms on the top floor. Originally, they'd looked for a house with a separate suite for mom and dad to live in, but they couldn't find anything within their price range, so now the plan is for everyone to move in together with the new baby. Everyone is nervous about this plan and the potential for conflict. I have no idea how they'll all get along with their big tempers, but I do know that my sister is devoted to my parents and really wants them in Toronto with us. She says it's costing many times the original estimate because of pandemic inflation, amounts of money that are unimaginable to me. Her friend Teapot, who's also their real estate agent, bought a new house that he's renovating as well. The contractor doing his house is cheaper than my sister's, cash only, but Teapot has to do a lot of the project managing. He also supports his brothers and sisters. 4th December. I read about a 98-year-old billionaire named Charles Munger who donated $200 million towards the construction of a new student residence at the University of California, Santa Barbara, with the stipulation that he designs the building. He doesn't have any architecture training. He's a finance guy who works with Warren Buffett. He calls himself an amateur architect. The building will be named Munger Hall and have 11 stories housing 4,500 students. 94% of the rooms won't have windows to the outside. Instead, there'll be light fixtures in the style of cruise ship windows. All 9 levels that are not the lobby feature identical floor plans so that it'll be cheaper to build, and there are only 2 entrances. One of the architects on the university's review committee, Dennis McFadden, quit, saying that it was inhumane and that the review committee has no actual input because the design is tied to the donation. He said, as the vision of a single donor, the building is a social and psychological experiment with an unknown impact on undergraduates. In response, Munger called all of his critics idiots, said his building fixes Le Corbusier's errors, and that the prefab concrete will last longer than the pyramids. He said every other college will be jealous. 5th December, at dim sum, the gallery director's partner showed Sofa a property listing on his phone for her opinion. They're looking for something to buy. I didn't get to see it. 6th December, no entry. 7th December, no entry. 8th December, I went to the showroom for the condo building that's being built across the street from the gallery. Walked through the show suite and thought it was nicely laid out, surprisingly. I felt a weird sense of desire toward the condo showroom and wondered, is this desire mine or has it been implanted? It felt a bit like walking through a doll's house and imagining yourself as a doll. On the floor plans, there were asterisks beside some of the suites, and at the bottom, in small print, the footnote said, future-friendly suite. I asked the salesperson what it meant, and she said, it means it's wheelchair accessible, as in, quote, friendly for aging. A telling euphemism for disability to acknowledge its possibility in the future while excluding it from the present. 9th December, no entry. 10th December. While looking at houses for sale in a neighborhood that they like, Paperclip and J-Cloth saw a huge truck speed through, flying a big flag with a black star, the outline of an AK-47, and the words, come and take it. They explained to me that it's a gun rights activist flag and the phrase is a threat. 11th December, watched Beetlejuice, the original one. The movie is essentially about an artist, the mom, who works with a real estate developer, the dad, to gentrify a haunted house. The ghosts are fighting their eviction. Spoon and Jacuzzi have a shockingly affordable, really nice apartment on the top floor of a building in West End, Vancouver. It's older, so it's huge, and you can see the ocean. Earlier in the day, Soap Dish had raved to me about it. You won't believe it. And when I got there, I too spent a good 10 to 15 minutes raving about how I couldn't believe it. 12th December, no entry. 13th December. Went on a walking tour of Vancouver's Chinatown, and the guide took me to see the remnant of a mural. Someone had spent $30,000 on a beautiful new mural, but then a condo went up right beside it, blocking all but a tiny vertical strip of it, 1 or 2 feet wide, like a ribbon. A portion of the old mural was replicated on the new building by a different artist, but it didn't really match the ribbon of the original. 14th December, no entry. 15th December, no entry. Oh, thank you. 16th December. Washcloth described an affordable housing project in Vancouver where people on fixed incomes can't apply, i.e. anyone on disability. So you need a job to be eligible, or the prospect of a growing income. It seems like applying for a mortgage, the opposite of affordable housing. 17th December. House prices in Victoria, BC are as unhinged as in Toronto, my sister texted. She was just in Victoria, famously a boomer retirement town, visiting friends. 18th December, no entry. 19th December. Mop is trying to get his mom out of the house she shares with his dad because it's becoming impossible for her to live in it. There's stuff everywhere to the point where it's hard to walk around, and she can't cook anymore because his dad's hoarding has entered the kitchen. Mop's dad spends all of his money on collecting stuff, mostly tools and machinery. He doesn't share any of his salary with her. She provided for all of their children with only the income from her low-wage job, and she even paid for half the house, but she technically co-owns it, but it's barely habitable. 20th December. My parents showed me the spot they'd bought for themselves at the cemetery. It's a kind of outdoor mausoleum, and they have a shelf to store their ashes. 21st December. I saw an ad on TV offering a reverse mortgage for retired people. 23rd, 22nd, 24th, no entry. 25th December. In Calgary over Christmas break, and I've been sorting and throwing out my childhood things at my parents' house. Toys, clothing, everything in preparation for their move. My mom's amazing. She never throws anything out. She's kept almost everything from my and my sister's childhoods, every report card, birthday card, my school uniform from kindergarten in Hong Kong, so many cute school projects. One of the best things I found was a newspaper my grade 6 class made with articles about our future selves. My contribution was a megalomaniacal piece about Amy Lam starting and leading a world feminist organization and persuading the Queen of England to cede all crown land to her. I'll show you after. My mom saved all her clothing, so I also picked up 20 plus pairs of really nice 90s pants from her, half for me and half for my partner, rice cooker. Most of my current clothing comes from my mom's old wardrobe. It's funny how she's still holding some of her stuff back, even if it doesn't fit her. She says she's not ready to let go of it yet. I had to really convince her to give me the pants, and she still has 5 closets of clothing, mostly from Winners, spread across the 3 floors of the house. One of the most bittersweet parts was going through the CD collection and trying to make Dad's old stereo system work again. I have so many memories of listening to his CDs on the stereo, of his love of music. My dad used to have a subscription to Columbia Club where he would get CDs in the mail, and it was always so fun to look at them. I remember being so confused and obsessed by the Jethro Tull album Thick as a Brick, and had a fake newspaper for the album art with all these fake articles that I read so intently. What did it mean? This might have been around the time of the grade 6 newspaper from the future. Blender and I sorted through all the family pics, gifts, and special objects that sit on the shelves in the family room above the fireplace/TV. It's supposedly where all the, quote, precious stuff goes, like Grandpa's crystal Lalique bowl, but it was also full of random stuff my mom had just shoved in there, like crappy souvenirs given to her by relatives. Blender kept saying, "There won't be room for this in the new house." We had to throw out Mom's old dried flower arrangements and wreaths. Everything was so dusty. 26th December. I saw my old friend Airplane from high school. We talked about the impossibility of ever buying anything anywhere and about my parents retiring this year but not being able to afford a home in Toronto. Her friend bought a cabin in upstate New York for $180,000. It's a very small 1-bedroom and the pipes aren't insulated for winter. We also covered the classic topic of how in Montreal, it's still cheaper, but it's changed a lot. It's true. Airplane plays $1,800 US in New York for a 2-bedroom. She still pays that, actually. 27th December. I watched a TikTok about the countries where house prices have risen the most. It showed a bar graph with the bars just rising and rising and rising. And the one that basically shot off the graph was Canada. The soundtrack was the theme song from Squid Game. The other day, I explained Squid Game to my dad. It's a Korean TV series about a super violent game show where all the contestants have insurmountable debts, and if they aren't killed, they can win a huge amount of money. His eyes opened super wide. Really? And I realized he thought I was describing a real reality show where people were actually killed for trying to eliminate their debt. 28th December, no entry. 29th December. I complained to Rice Cooker, it's fucked up that my parents have worked their whole lives, sometimes 2 jobs, and still can't afford to buy their own house in Toronto, which is just another city in Canada where their kids live. Not that everyone needs to own a house, but in the absence of other forms of security, what else is there? Rice Cooker got a response from one of the hundreds of apartment co-op applications he sent in earlier this year on our behalf. We're not sure yet if I'll move to Montreal or if he'll move to Toronto, but he thought we should see if we could get into one of the co-op buildings because that might tip the balance. There are way more co-ops in Montreal than Toronto. The system is still supported by the provincial government in some way, and there's a lot of variety in terms of building and location. And the price is very humane. Rice Cooker spent weeks compiling a big list of all the co-ops, writing letters and mailing them off, and now one has written back. 30th December, no entry. 31st December. I talked to Rice Cooker about how a frying pan owned a house because he inherited some money before the market went bonkers, and how I was frustrated because I felt like he didn't understand or fully acknowledge the privilege of his position, and this was part of what ended our relationship for me. But during our relationship, I lived in his house basically for free, and he was always so giving and generous to me. Maybe the most difficult thing was this tension within myself between how I lived and what I thought was, quote, right. No entries from the 1st to the 9th of January. 10th January. I took some time off and forgot or was too tired to write things down in this journal, and now I can't remember them. I'm sure there's lots of things I missed. And that's all I'm going to read. Actually, Parker, is it okay if we keep it on? Yep. Okay, thank you. Yeah,
Hey,
hi,
Amani. Okay, before we get started, I just want to share a quick note. I think that as Amy was reading, obviously this book is lighthearted. There are parts of it that are funny. There are parts of it that are, like relatable and things like that. I think the parts that people were laughing at actually weren't that funny, to be honest. And I think that as someone, again, I'm not actually making a joke. So I do think that, I was actually pretty angry reading, and as you were reading, listening to the bits about construction and about people being so bewildered at how much has changed so quickly. Mm-hmm. And I think that our understanding of the book is also going to be reflective of our understanding of cities and of what happens in these cities. And I think we should all be really willing to understand that in the context of grief, weight, and sadness, and not always looking for a laugh. So I do think there were parts I was actually getting quite angry as you were reading, and I was feeling a bit this is part of what we're talking about, you know? So yeah, before we get started, that's all I want to say. Congratulations on your book. I do think it's a great book. I think, again, as someone from Toronto, I felt so much resonance in it. I felt a lot of points of like stuckness, confusion, grief, anger, bewilderment, and all of these are part of the process of what happens when you're in a city that you see dying before you, right? So yeah, that's my preamble. I did want to talk, obviously, about the book and talk to Amy about the process and about how we've all gotten here. Sorry, I'm like obviously still a bit angry. Okay, so my first question, yeah, I'm like, whatever. Anyway, my first question is, the book has taken on a few processes since its inception and in the process of becoming a book.
Sorry, can we pause just for a second?
Yeah.
I just want to talk a bit about like what you were saying about laughing and anger. And I've been thinking about like laughter a lot lately and what it is. And I was writing this essay for a friend, and there's this laughter in her performance, and the performance ended in laughter, and it was kind of like it kept going and going and it didn't stop. And the audience didn't know when the performance stopped, and the performers were laughing at the audience, and it was very confusing. And I think it made some of the audience angry because this laughter didn't stop. Anyway, there's just something about laughter that I think is like, basically when I was writing this, I was reading about like theories of humor, which blah, 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 like I don't need to get into it, but laughing is this like very ancient or very like innate response. Like babies laugh before they cry, you know, like
Right.
There's like this response, and it's like, why do people laugh? You know, I think it's a very interesting question, like why do people laugh? And when I was writing this, I was thinking about, well, laughter is a very social thing. Like obviously we don't all laugh at the same things, and we don't find the same things funny, and there's something about it which is about like values and like clarifying what your values are and like understanding what other people have similar values to you. So to me, like this response of laughter and the feeling of anger is very bound up, and that's also how I feel in life all the time. You know, when I'm really angry about something, I want to laugh about it. Yeah.
But we don't laugh at everything, which is my point.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, but yeah, that's something that I wanted to bring.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry to
Sure.
interrupt. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us about, I guess, how Property Journal came together. Tell us about what drew you to the book as a form. Tell us about other iterations of kind of this thought process and like thread of thought that you've had. Some context.
The book started as part of an exhibition, and maybe I can show you like the title of the exhibition was called A Small But Comfy House and Maybe a Dog, and it came from this like piece of paper that I wrote on when I was 11, and my mom found when she was like moving out of the house. And you can see like it starts age 15 and age 20 and age 25 and age 30, and then it just ends at age 30. Like there's no life after age 30, and I just turned like 41, so I thought this was really funny when I found it a couple of years ago. And in the last one, in age 25, it says, I'll be married by now, I'll have a job, a speech art teacher or a chemist, I'll have a small but comfy house and maybe a dog. And so that's what the title of the exhibition came from. And I was really thinking about like this idea of like being a kid and having these ideas. Like, why did I have this idea of like wanting to own a house with a dog in it, you know, and be married? And I found it like disturbing, you know. So that exhibition, which was at the Richmond Art Gallery, was a lot about thinking about aging and precarity and like housing. And the gallery was also located across from this enormous condo development, which is the one that I talk about visiting in one of the entries. And so I wanted to respond to this context. And then I guess around this time, I knew that my parents were like in the process of thinking of moving, and I was also seeing something happening in the city, which you described as a death. And it's true, that's what I was experiencing in 2021, was like, what is going on in Toronto, you know? And so I decided to start keeping this journal. And yeah, I just did it, and I wasn't sure how it was going to be presented, but in the end, in the exhibition, it was presented as this 1 page a day calendar. So In the exhibition, you would kind of visit and you would see like maybe 10 entries, and every day a new entry was revealed by a gallery like worker. They would rip a page off and throw it on the floor. So in the exhibition, it was very different because no one could read the whole book from top to bottom. And then when I started working on this as a book format, I was like, fuck, I'm fucked. Like, everyone's gonna read my fucking diary. Like, why am I doing this? You know? So I really struggled with that and like procrastinated for a long time, which is why the book came out now. And then the book ended up being like quite, the content is the same, but it's very edited. Not necessarily in terms of like censored, but just like edited, because the way that I kept the journal was I just wrote down notes in my phone every day. So people would say stuff and then I'd be like, Amani said this. And then, you know, I would just write things down verbatim. So it ended up being much more, it's just like a different form of what the raw kind of journal entries are. Yeah. And it was installed in this room that overlooked the condo development with these couches. These are all the couches from my family's home, and they're arranged in this kind of like couch clock is what it's called.
I love these couches. They're like so nostalgic of a specific time. Like, obviously your family home to my family home to, I'm sure, many people's family homes. It's like, also, can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
What do you think? Like, do you think the book form aided or hindered the process? Like, what do you think it did to the story?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it definitely, the concept itself is a hindrance, right? Because I'm only allowed to write about this one thing. And, you know, when you read the book, you'll see that lots of other things get wrapped into it because property is so much a part of everything that structures, you know, everything around us. But it was like looking at the world through like a very reduced kind of lens, which I think is part of what the work is. I think in terms of like what I was saying earlier about like having to turn it into a book form, I did really think about, or try to think about, like what would be the experience of like someone reading this from front to back and wanting to give it some shape beyond just like my raw notes from my journal. I also want to say like thank you to everyone that I talked to in this room about property and whose stories are like reflected in the book, because lots of you exist in the book. Yeah.
So the book follows you through a bunch of different cities. Obviously, there's a big route in Toronto, but you're also in different parts of the UK. You're in Vancouver. I wonder what sort of the connective threads are in like a visual sense, and seeing how all these different places are changing. What are kind of the shared things that you notice? What are kind of maybe the unique things?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, well, when I was working with the designer on designing the book, we were talking about like different iterations of how it could go. And one thing that we thought about was like, oh, what if we made the book look really bland? Like in the way that these cities now look really bland. Like it's like blandification. Everything is like gray and black and white and yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's some oak or something. Like this is the way it looks. And so we were trying to think like, okay, like what is the book version of that? And then we could never really land on it because we ended up having these like really weird like iterations that either just looked like art books sorry like contemporary art. It either looked like contemporary art or it looked like a weird like annual report, which felt too much, like it felt too heavy-handed. So we went with this kind of more maximalist style in the end. But I think that is like a real thing that you see in just every city, is like it's homogenous, it's homogenized. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about, I guess, how the book looks, like the checkered design. How did you get there? Why did you choose to do the black and white contrasted?
The grid comes from this like meme that was posted by Dank Lloyd Wright, and you can read the caption and it says, "Common sense doesn't matter when you're laundering money." This is actually like a Toronto floor plan. I think it's maybe of like a kind of student residence kind of building, and you can see like it's so ridiculous. the long Z-shaped hallway and the box, this kind of maximalization of space that makes it completely not make sense for actual life. And so that's where the grid kind of comes from, is like this Z and the box, and trying to maximize the page but also make it claustrophobic and not really make sense. Like, it doesn't really make sense that it's in black and white, and also it doesn't make sense that it's actually printed in black and white, but it's like CMYK. It's all the colors to make this black. So yeah, there's things that are kind of unreasonable about it. But I think to me, I really love this as a book, because I think that it expresses in its form to this kind of idea of like, yeah, just how we think about like using everything.
Tell us about the back of the book.
Oh yeah. So if
This was like, this really shocked me. Like, you got me on I was talking to her about the back, and or about the design of the book, and she was like, if you noticed on the back, and I was like, I didn't notice until you said it.
So if you look at the back of the book, there's these 3 pictures, and I'll show you on the slides. They're of my parents' house in Calgary. This is the drone view from the real estate listing of my parents' house. And so if you look at the sky, you notice something is going on in the sky. What's going on? Weird. Like, what? That's fucking weird. Yeah, so Rosen, who designed the book, noticed this, and basically, yeah, they just ripped out the sky from the photos and then put the same sky in all of it, and then there's this strange cloud now floating over my house, my former house. And so that's the back cover of the book, and I thought it was just a great symbol for what, like, yeah, property is, like, as a structure.
Yeah. What do you think is like, for me, when you told me that, I felt a bit haunted by that idea of like ripping the sky, like you just said. Mm-hmm. What does that sort of, like, what does that choice symbolize to you, or like what does that kind of explain to you about what you're speaking about in the book?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the sinister thing, and it's completely unrealistic, and it's also like a misrepresentation of the natural world, you know.
And ownership of the sky to an extent.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
I think one of the things I really enjoyed about the book is this constant return to thinking about like health in a way that is multifaceted and kind of like interwoven through different parts of your life, whether that's like physical health, personal health, worrying about the health of another, understanding a sort of like spiritual health. And I don't know, I just wonder if that was intentional, if that was a thing that just happened because they were kind of diary entries, and what you kind of think about that idea of health, decay in the context of writing this book, but also in the context of like living through all these changes in all these cities.
Yeah, I guess like I'm like an anxious person, so I'm always worrying, and health is something that I worry about all the time, so that's why it shows up in the journal. I think it's it's thinking about my parents aging and the fact of where they're going to live, and that's a huge part of it. And I think there's an entrance where I write about like both babies and elders need secure places to live, out of all people. And like in our in like Western society, the babies are okay, people respect babies. Right?
So?
To a certain extent, or they value babies, there's a value for babies, but, or like, yeah, you know what I mean. But for elders, like, or for seniors or older people, like that doesn't exist. Yeah. It just doesn't exist. And to me, that is the most like outrageous thing, and yeah, I think that, I guess, yeah, I've been thinking about, I read this interview with this scholar of religion, Biko Mandela Gray, and he had this line about like how we should, rather than thinking of ourselves as human beings, we should reframe this understanding and think of ourselves as mortal beings, like beings who will die. Yeah. And that really stuck with me, and just this idea of like, how do we actually acknowledge death, and how do we acknowledge health as something that isn't yeah, that there's just like lots of state of health and sickness, and everyone goes through all of these, and that is also reflected in like the journal or the entries that I read about like disability. It's like, you know, it's always in the future. It's never right now, you know.
And this idea of, like, I think the irony of that entry in particular is like the marketing towards a people that you're banking on dying, right? Which is like, yeah, I love that one. And I also have a few entries maybe that we can pull up and talk about. I'll let you pull it up first, actually. This one? Do you want to do the other one first? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Amazing. Okay, so on page 27, the entry that you actually just read from December 31st, there was something that really stuck out to me about that one, and maybe I can read like the line. But I think there's like a haunting quality that I really loved throughout the book, but I think in this entry it was really, just like very honest and real. And I think when you said, I talked to Rice Cooker about how Frying Pan owned a house because he inherited some money before the market went bonkers. And then you say that you were frustrated because you felt that he didn't understand or fully acknowledge the privilege of his position. And this is part of what ended the friendship. But then also there was a generosity and a givingness throughout that friendship, right? Or sorry, that relationship. And then you're thinking now about the tension. And the last line is my favorite line, where you say, maybe the most difficult thing was this tension within myself between how I lived and what I thought was right. Can you speak a bit more to that idea of like a moral versus material kind of contradiction that everyone faces, obviously living in this world and within these systems? But I think, I just really like that line.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I've thought about this line a lot when I was working on the book and editing it, and I was like, what do I really mean by that? And I was like, should I expand? And then I could never do more. Like I could never really I just thought like, I'm just gonna leave it, you know. And my editor tried to edit it out, and then I was like, no, I'm just gonna leave it. She was like, you should expand on it. And I was like, I don't know how. So maybe you're asking me, like, I still feel that, well, I think, you know, it's like there's something in there about my judgment of someone else, of my former partner, which I don't think was necessarily the most fair, but it was also a frustration that I couldn't resolve within myself, you know. And I think that happens all the time when we have principles and we have political principles and we don't know how to reconcile that, or there's like dissonance between our lives and what our principles are. And I think that is obviously the work, to try to act in a way that reconciles that dissonance. But of course, it's like everyone around you too, and how they behave and how they live, you know. And you can't just fix that. Like,
I think what I loved about it is I think like everyone has a level of dissonance that they live with, right? And so speaking to that, to me, within a book about property and about a changing space, and recognizing that change is also happening internally and within the people around you, I think was just like really honest and really great. So I really like that part. There's one more excerpt on page 52 that I want to read.
Oh yeah, here it is.
And it's an extension of what we were just talking about. But this idea of, like in the last line, we can all read it in our minds, but the last line where you say, it's gross actually wandering through poor neighborhoods, wondering how much the houses cost, acting like settlers, right? So again, there's this grief of, you're thinking about yourself, about your sister who has like new children, about your parents who are aging, but then you're also recognizing that there is a difference between, like, you know. So I just wonder what you thought about that one in conversation with the one that we just,
I mean, I look at people's houses all the time, and I think about how much they might cost, and like I feel jealous of them, and like, you know, I'm looking in people's windows and I'm like, look at that lamp, like that looks nice, you know. And there's another entry in the journal about how I like would walk through this neighborhood in Montreal all the time that was like gentrifying, and I'd look at people's houses and I'd be like, that looks really nice. Maybe one day when I have a full-time job at a university in like tenure or something, like I can live in a place like that. And then I had this moment of realization where I was like, people, like these people are like stock market people. Like they're like people who work in finance. Like they're not university profs necessarily, and definitely not me, like, or what, you know. But yeah, I mean, that's part of where the title of the exhibition came from. Is just like, how do you shake this idea of like security equals owning a home? And like, that must be my number one goal in life.
Yeah. And I love the line just above in the entry above where you say the spiritual baby or the physical house. Like that's really part of that tension, I think. And it's just like, yeah, I really love, those are some of my favorite entries from the book.
Thank you.
Okay. I think I want to hear from other people.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think? Do we have thoughts, questions, concerns about the book that we want to share?
Maybe we can, oh yeah, there's a mic that can be passed around. Questions?
I think we have a live one as well. that you were
Oh,
saying.
maybe while people think of questions, I can show you my megalomaniacal. How old was that? I think I wrote this in 1995. So I'll just read you the thing, my article about myself. Women's rights group takes over continent of Europe. The World Women's Rights Group, WWRG, has currently taken over Europe. The vivacious group leader, 31-year-old Amy Lam, gathered females from all over the world to participate in a march to the Parliament buildings in London, England. Lam spoke to the Queen herself. Her Majesty allowed Lam to take control of England and all British government properties. However, Lam had to swear on the Bible that no corruption would occur and absolutely no violence would occur. Okay, I was like 12 and obviously liberal. The other countries of Europe, having heard of this act, promptly agreed to hand control over to women, but only under the exact circumstances. We asked a male passerby what he thought, and he replied by saying, well, it was bound to happen sooner or later. However, not everybody had the same views. One male said some things that just cannot be printed into a newspaper. We asked Lam for a quote, and she said, this could not have happened without the influence of my family and my best friend Tanya Brooks. Of course, I credit all women on Earth too. I first started to get hyped about women's rights in grade 6. The boys always thought they were the best, but I made a promise to myself to show them up, and now I have. Remember, females, we rule. How true.
This is so free. Like, this is great. What?
I was going to negotiate with the Queen.
I think you shouldn't call 12-year-old you a liberal.
I shouldn't have? No.
I think she's really free and like a dreamer, and I love that. Questions? Concerns?
Thanks. Thanks for both of you for the presentation. As I'm hearing you speak and hearing from the book, I'm struck by this kind of raw honesty of like kind of showing like all the contradictions and stuff, dissonance as you called it. And I was also thinking like for some reason my brain went back to like the Dord days and that kind of scene in in Kensington Market of this kind of comedy that was like almost embarrassing comedy. I don't know if you characterize it that way, but to me it felt like it's almost like a humor of almost showing too much or showing the wrong bits of yourself. I don't know. I'm just kind of like freestyle thinking, but like thinking about kind of the question that you brought up, which was so great about comedy and humor, kind of like that nervous laughter that's like not laughter, but hiding something else. I don't know. Is there like, I don't know what my question is, but I guess I'm trying to think of like, where did this voice come from? Like what allowed you to have a voice like this in your school days, but also like earlier as an artist to kind of, your voice feels so strong and solid to me right now. And I would like to know kind of what experiences or formative things led to that.
Maybe who were you writing to?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I can like fully answer that. Like, who am I writing to? I think in this newspaper, I'm trying to like, I don't know, impress my fellow students or make my friend Tanya laugh. I don't remember writing this at all. Like, I have zero memory of this. So when I found it, I was like, what? This is wild. Like, yeah, these are other articles that other students wrote. So we all had to write about ourselves in the future, you know. And then so Marvin wrote about inventing a cyborg. But yeah, I don't have any memory of writing this, and I don't know where it came from at all. I really don't, you know. And yeah, so I don't know if I can answer.
Do you remember writing other parts of your book or other things, or are they like lucid moments, you think, and you kind of...
Like the journal?
Yeah, the journal, like your process. Yeah, generally.
I mean, I definitely remember writing the journal because it was hard to write. It was a hard journal to keep. Like, I didn't enjoy doing it. And when it was over, I was like, thank God this project is fucking over because this sucks. Like, you know, every day, every night I'd be home, like, saying, like, someone wrote this and someone said this. And I was constantly paying attention to, like, who owned property, whose parents owned property. And whenever someone said something like that, like, my brain would just go, like, not only did I have to write about it, but I would immediately start comparing myself to them, you know? And so, yeah, I think that question, or, like, the point of you bring up of anger is, like, a really real one. And that kind of did drive the book in some ways. And it's a question, or not really a question, but that's like, yeah, definitely a strong driving force in some ways. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I need a microphone.
I think for the live stream. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Amy, it was really interesting to hear you read from your journal. And I was thrilled to hear that you're a worrier, which means you're capable of solving problems. So my question, of course, throughout this is, what's the problem and what do you now see as the solution? Because nobody's benefiting from this housing crisis that you refer to.
I mean, the solution, like, yeah, is like complete, you know, overthrow of the system. That's the real solution. Like, you know, I think something, I mean, it's not something that I write about directly in the book, but the history of like private property is one that is completely tied up with racial capitalism and like the idea of like a possessive individual who can own other people, you know, and this is the history and this is where private property is like a thing comes from. So yeah, that's the solution.
Yes, but those conditions have always existed.
Well,
in this city, especially, what's recently changed in the last 5 years, 10 years?
Well, I would say that, like, you know, in the description of the book, there's a line about like the permanent state of crisis. That's known as the permanent state of things, which is known as the housing crisis. And now we talk about the housing crisis as if it's a new thing, but it's been going on for a long time, like you say. And Canada as a settler colony hasn't been like this for the whole time. So yeah.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
I think also what's changed in the last 5 to 10 years is just a broader group of people are affected. Like, I think it's literally Black History Month. You know what I mean? Like, private property is, yeah, abolish that, like, top to bottom, I think. So I do think the more people are affected, the more it becomes a crisis, but it's always been a crisis, its inception.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you giving voice to this tension and reflections that we're all in, and I'm wondering how your definition or feeling around security has changed writing this book?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it has changed. And I think it's changed also because of the last year and a half, due to the ongoing genocide in Palestine and in Gaza. And in wanting to fight against that and joining a movement and having comrades in that, like, that has shifted my sense of what security is, you know. I mean, the book is also trying to, like, it's not like the only time, or it's not like this is the one thing that has changed it, but it has definitely shifted how I think more in a more extreme way, or in a more like radical way. And especially, I mean, yeah, I don't want to talk about like this current moment, blah, 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 but like it's real, you know, and we're living in a time of immense change. And I think this shift in like thinking of what is actually security, beyond possessions and money, like it's so basic, but it really is like a really important thing. Yeah. I feel like I'm losing my ability to form sentences, so maybe we can like take one more question. Yeah.
How's Blender and the baby?
Very cute. Yeah, they're doing good. I mean, it's still, you know, it's a challenging situation to live with your parents, for my sister, and for my parents to live with my sister, but yeah. They're named Penny and Benny.
Oh, amazing. Love that.
Yeah.
Property journal too?
No. Yeah, thank you, Amani. Thank you to everyone for coming. And yeah, buy the book, support Art Met and my publisher, and I'll also sign the book for you if you want. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Sorry for hijacking.